Ministry of Cabinet Affairs or Development Officer. And to everyone here, from Batica all the way to Sineku, we really appreciate everyone coming here. Warm welcome. And last but not least, we want to give hats off to our my deepest apologies. To an village, my deepest apologies. You are welcome. Thank you so much for coming and attending. We really appreciate you. And last but not least, our cultural officer, Mr. Prosper Paris. Thank you for being here with us. We really and truly appreciate you. Once again, welcome everyone for attending.
Let me recognize the officer in the Ministry of Kalinago Affairs, Mr. Ozia Frederick, cultural officer, Mr. Prosper Paris, a very good friend. We go back a very, very long way, Mr. Paris. Youth development experts, Mr. Henry Charles. Youth officer, Mrs. Nikki, who is also here with us today. President of the Kalinago Youth Council, Ms. Natasha Green. Executive members of the Kalinago Youth Council, Kalinago Youth from all various hamlets, including Concord, invited guests, and our media. Pleasant good morning to you all. Let me thank the Kalinago Youth Council for inviting me and the youth officer for the Eastern District, Mrs. Nikki, to be part of the Kalinago Youth Assembly and also the inauguration of the newly elected Kalinago Youth Council. I consider today's occasion to be a historic one. I'm also pleased that Mr. Henry Charles is able to join us to enrich today's experience with his perspective on the indigenous youth. Mr. Charles is often referred to by youth work practitioners in the Caribbean as the grandfather of youth development in the region and also the extension in the Commonwealth. The Youth Development Division's main mandate from inception has been the empowerment of our young men and our young women in order to ensure the sustainable development of Dominica. When I speak of empowerment, I am making reference to the holistic preparation of our young minds, which enables them to contribute to the social, economic, educational, cultural, and political development of the country. I want to emphasize here that the real value of empowerment of young people is realized not just by their participation in the development of the nation, but more so when they engage in the decision-making, the direction, and the leadership process. Today's inauguration of the Kalinago Youth Council is a symbolic manifestation of the real value of empowerment. I am familiar with some of the executive members of the Kalinago Youth Council, and I have a great deal of confidence in their leadership potential. I want to applaud all those who were instrumental in the establishment of the Kalinago Youth Council and the drafting of a well-thought-of constitution to guide the administration of the Kalinago Youth Council. I want to recognize in a very special way the efforts of Development Officer Mr. Ozia Frederick. The subject of indigenous people has over the years been attracting tremendous attention, and even more so in recent time. There has been much talk on issues such as the preservation of the culture and heritage of the indigenous people, the economic and educational empowerment of indigenous people, and the political empowerment of the indigenous people. I welcome the entry of the Kalinago Youth Council into the development arena because your work is well cut out for you. My hope is that you will take the ongoing discourse to another level to champion the cause of the indigenous people beyond lip service. My experience with the youth for the past 3 decades has always been one of action. The youth become restless when there is little or no action and when progress is retarded. Your role, therefore, as the Kalinago Youth Council is one of advocacy to provide a voice on behalf of the Kalinago youth who are seeking for educational, vocational, economic, social, and recreational advancement. A voice for the Kalinago youth whose rights are violated because of their socio-economic circumstances, their disability, or their sexual orientation. A voice for the Kalinago youth who are victimized because of their political affiliation, and a voice for the Kalinago youth who are discriminated against because of being Kalinago. I want to admonish the newly elected Kalinago Youth Council to be prepared to deal with these situations because they are real and you will be confronted with them. Please don't let the Kalinago youth see you as those who are depriving, or as those who are violating, or as those who are victimizing, or as those who are discriminating. Instead, the Kalinago youth need to see you as a hope for their cause and an advocate for their agenda. The establishment of the Kalinago Youth Council came just at the commencement of a new development era, which will take us through the next 15 years. Youth development is at the heart of the Sustainable Development Goals, and the indigenous people, and the indigenous youth is a central focus of a new national youth policy for Dominica that the Youth Development Division is currently crafting in collaboration with the Commonwealth Secretariat and the National Youth Council. It is anticipated that this new national youth policy will be ready for submission to Cabinet by the end of this year. In addition, the Youth Development Division, the National Youth Council, and the Kalinago Youth Council are also finalizing a National Youth Ambassadors Corps to be submitted very soon for Cabinet approval. The mission of this entity is to adequately prepare a dynamic corps of youth leaders who are committed to provide quality service and high-level representation at national, regional, and international forums on behalf of the young people of Dominica during this new development period. I look forward to a very fruitful deliberation during today. Let me, on behalf of the Youth Development Division and the Ministry of Youth, Sports, Culture, and Constituency Empowerment, congratulate the newly elected executive of the Kalinago Youth Council and wish you well during the term. You have an enormous task ahead of you. But be assured of the support of the Youth Development Division as we partner with you to advance the cause of the Kalinago youth. Happy International Indigenous Peoples Day, and God's blessing. Thank you.
I'm very proud to be as a person, first of all, and I feel very youthful. I passed 40 on the this year, but I feel very, very youthful. In different circles, we have different time frames for youth, and I feel as a kind of person, it might be up to 50. I feel very, very youthful. I'm happy to be here on this particular day because this day it's a world recognized day for indigenous people. It has moved beyond the borders of local government, moved beyond central government, moved beyond national governments. So in the international world, they all realize this day, have found it fit to highlight this day as Indigenous Peoples Day. So I'm very happy here to represent myself, and also the Ministry of Carnival Affairs and the Minister. I will give you a brief, I'll attempt to give you a brief background of the day itself, and then I will have a brief discussion on this brief remark about the theme for this for today, because everything for me is going for Mr. Charles and myself in our presentations as today. So we have there's an estimate of over 370 million indigenous people in the world. 370 million indigenous people. So we add 3,000 upon 370 million. And indigenous peoples are across the globe. They are on the continent of Africa, in Asia, and in the South Pacific, all the way. So when we have a movement for indigenousness, it's not us, it's not us by ourselves. We have 370,000, 20 million people. So it amounts to about 15% of the world. The important point here is the world poorest people. And that is why our foreign is so important, because although we have a big majority, we have a majority of people who are very, very poor. And when we talk about poor, we're only talking about infrastructure and physical development, but also talking about our development in terms of the education background, etc. Now, in December 1994, the United Nations Assembly decided that there should be an International Day for Indigenous Peoples, and to be observed on every 9th August. So it doesn't matter. Every 9th August is the particular day. It was one of the first decade of Indigenous Peoples. It was a 10-day span that the whole looked on us, and something that I find that we haven't done much in all of those decades. Nonetheless, it was established, and the outcome of all of these discussions is that there was a world system action plan for the indigenous people to incorporate everything that has to be indigenous. So it is very, very important that we take this into consideration. Now, when we look at the theme for this year, it is indigenous people's right to education. We have found that the right of indigenous peoples is protected by the UN Declaration of Indigenous Peoples' Rights. So it is not a favor that any government is giving you. It is not a gift that any local government is giving you. Within the sphere of international government, international world, you have a right as an indigenous person to have education. So you need to have that in your mind, because it is the first step to an emancipation of ourselves in our minds and in our hearts. The right of indigenous peoples to education is also protected by a number of other international conventions. So, for instance, we have the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights itself. You as a human person, you have a right to education. You as a child have a right to education. The Convention of the Rights of the Child gives a right to education. So we have all of those different agencies, international agencies, like I said before, that they're far above our constitution, far above our local government, and they ensure that you have to have that right. What we have found out too is that there's an agenda for sustainable development in the world, and there's an agenda for up to 2030. That's when most of you will be at least 50. And during that time, there's a call for access to equal education. So not just education, but equal levels of education. And not only academic education, but also for vocational education. Now what we have found out is that despite all of those rights in the world, we still find indigenous peoples around the world still don't have access to education. Nonetheless, when we look at our present situation on Dominica, on the Kalinago territory, we see that we have found that our situation is not so bad like all the indigenous communities. If we do an assessment of our community right now, we'll see that there are 5 primary schools, access to 5 primary schools, access to 4 preschools, access to 2 secondary schools, access to a state college, and access to tertiary education. Now when we think of these as young persons, we have to be mindful that it is an onus on us to take advantage of those access points. So although we have a right, very important, we have a responsibility now to access those points. So even within our sphere, the Kalinago Territory, when we do connection with the Ministry of Canada Affairs, which is an agency that has to work in collaboration with the Kalinago Council, the goals of the Kalinago Affairs is to create an equal opportunity for everyone on Dominica who has an affinity for Kalinago culture and heritage. In some circles, it is misconstrued, it is being messed up, it is being watered down, and we want to limit it to a Kalinago territory. But the indigenous movement of Dominica is not confined to Kalinago territory, because the historical facts we have showed us that there are communities in Dominica that have a deep Kalinago heritage. And when we do the archaeology, the academic archaeology of the history of Dominica, we have found out that every single community in Dominica have a kind of heritage. When you hear the name Kalinago, when you have Kalinago, when you have Kulibishi, when you have Meru, when you have Bawi, all of those are kind of names. Even when we speak the Creole language, and we have Titi, and we have Fufu, and we have Kashima, all of those words are kind of words. So even if it is part now of what we call a Creole culture, it is deeply rooted in the heritage of Kalinago. So as a person involved in development, as a person who is involved in all this development, my job is to enlighten you that our heritage as Kalinago people goes beyond just this community into other communities in Dominica. And as I told you through the International Day today, it goes beyond that into the sphere of the international day. We'll have a conversation a little bit later on, I have a presentation with you, and I will engage you in a conversation because you have to speak and you have to share ideas because I am only a facilitator of learning and information and we will share the development. So once again, I'd like to thank the Kalinago Council is going to be inaugurated today. It's a wonderful move. I am meeting a group like this about 3 months ago, downstairs this building, give a brief history of what was evolving as the Kalinago Youth Council. I'm happy today that it's actually getting off, and happier that we have the Chief Development Officer for Youth Right Lagos. You can't run away, it's on record. We have the Youth District Officer here. She can't run away from this engagement because she's on record. We also have a consultant, the grandfather of youth in the Caribbean, Mr. Charles. He can't run away neither because he's going to be on record. Because he's here in this function to endorse the Kalinago Council, to endorse us as young persons as we move forward to make our lives better. Thank you guys.
Thank you. Allow me to recognize the presence of the Chief Youth Development Officer, Mr. Roche, Development Officer of the Ministry of Kalinago Affairs, Mr. Frederick, Councillor Hill, who just joined us, and Councillor responsible for education, Cultural Officer, Mr. Paris, and the District Youth Development Officer, Mr. Sleepy Darrow, and of course you, the invited guests. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to stand here before you today as the newly elected President of the Kalinago Youth Council. Like most of you here today, I will continue to embrace the opportunity to assist with youth development of this community, helping to ensure that our indigenous youth are sufficiently guided into leading productive lives. The Kalinago Youth Council was re-established on May 19, 2016 for the sole purpose of garnering the resources and resourceful youth to work towards the wholesome development of Dominica's indigenous youth. While we have achieved significant milestones through the efforts of the Youth Development Division, Kalinago Council, and Kalinago Affairs, it is only fitting that we as youth mobilize ourselves to advocate and work towards our needs and the needs of others. Guided by the mission to enhance the quality of life, to promote economic opportunity, and to carry out the responsibility to protect and improve the trust assets of indigenous youth of Waiti Kubuli by providing better services, opportunities, and outcomes, we can only achieve our mission with your support and participation. Today we join the rest of the international indigenous community in celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day, led by the theme Indigenous Peoples' Right to Education, engaging youth in informative dialogue. Today we take the opportunity to ensure that our youth are assembled for the purpose of receiving important information on the relevance of education in uplifting us as a community, as well as to encourage youth discussion and feedback on other prominent issues which affect our development. Thus far, the executive body of KYC has formulated the 4 priority areas which will be given serious focus during our 1-year tenure. Food security on the basis that our youthful population should be encouraged to eat healthy and to develop sustainable agricultural practices and habits. Culture and heritage development to assist with cultural promotion and to encourage youth appreciation for key aspects of our indigenous culture and heritage. Social and economic development to ensure youth participation in educational and career development opportunities, and advocate for benefit of our youth in business development. Environmental sustainability to advocate for preservation of our watershed areas and to encourage youth protection of the environment. On behalf of the KYC, I therefore urge you to be resilient and be proactive in your approach on life. Continue to do your best and maintain a positive outlook on life. KYC is here to serve you, and by working together, we can surpass all the hurdles that we face as youth. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to all the distinguished guests who joined us today. And, thank you for the honor of the privilege of requesting the executive of the KYC to take their pledges. So now I will ask Ms. Enibati to place her right hand on her heart to begin the pledge, which she has been practicing for the last few weeks.
I, Natasha Green, do solemnly pledge to defend and promote the principles and policies enshrined in the Constitution of the Kalinago Youth Council. I promise to serve diligently in my capacity as President of the Kalinago Youth Council to advance the cause of all Kalinago youth in their quest for social, economic, and cultural empowerment.
Thank you, sir. We will now proceed to Mr. Paul Barron, who is the Vice President. Mr. Barron.
I, Paul Barron, do solemnly pledge to defend and promote the principles and policies enshrined in the Constitution of the Kalinago Youth Council. I promise to serve diligently in my capacity as Vice President of the Kalinago Youth Council to advance the cause of Kalinago youth in their quest for social, economic, and cultural empowerment.
The Secretary.
I, Mr. Dela, do solemnly pledge to defend and promote the principles and policies enshrined in the Constitution of the Kalinago Youth Council. I promise to serve diligently in my capacity as Secretary of the Kalinago Youth Council to advance the cause of all Kalinago youth in their quest for social, economic, and cultural empowerment.
Now the Finance Chair. Of the Finance, as the person having all the money. Please proceed.
I, Rama Vaman.
Yes.
I, Rama Vaman, do solemnly pledge to defend and promote the principles and policies enshrined in the Constitution of the Kalinago Youth Council. I promise to serve diligently in my capacity as Treasurer of the Kalinago Youth Council to advance the cause of all Kalinago youth in their quest for social, economic, and cultural empowerment.
All right. So the right hand, of course, your heart, and this is the events coordinator.
I, Catherine Paris, do solemnly swear to pledge to defend and promote the principles and policies enshrined in the Constitution of the Kalinago Youth Council. I promise to serve diligently in my capacity as U.S. coordinator of the Kalinago Youth Council to advance the cause of all Kalinago youth in their quest for social, economic, and cultural empowerment.
Excellent. Let's hear all the applause for all of the members of the Executive Council. Thank you so much for your service. We look forward to all of you who are here today and all of the other youth in the community supporting them, because clearly they cannot accomplish what they need to accomplish in this community without your support. All right? So we're looking forward to you standing behind them firmly as they move along this journey. Thank you very much.
As part of the presentation, today is International Industry Day. And here's a statement said by the attention please. by the Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. He says that we will not achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, like we were earlier on, 2030, if we fail to address the educational needs of indigenous peoples. Right there. Very simple. Like I said earlier in the presentation, the Indigenous Peoples Day today supersedes all constitutions. It supersedes all government, local government. So local government, think of council. That supersedes council. Government, in terms of central government in Dominica, the executive and everybody else, it supersedes that. It's at the United Nations level. That's where we have this university. So I will give you we'll have a brief call. This is going to be our conversation this morning. We'll look at the theme and how it's relevant to us. We'll look at some of the rights and goals. And like I said earlier on, some of the responsibilities that we have. I'll give you a brief history of education itself. Not today, but education itself in the course of human history. We'll look at our present situation. And then we'll look specifically for a little while. And we'll open up the conversation a little more into looking at more specifically indigenous education. So this is our film here. I pulled it out of the website. I have added a list of references that you could copy and use for future reference. So this year's International Day of World's Indigenous People is devoted to the right of education. The right of education is protected by the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which it is in Article 40 that it states, indigenous peoples have the right to establish and to control the education system and institutions, providing education in their own languages in a manner appropriate to their cultural methods of teaching and learning. That is what indigenous education is. And if you think about it right now, you will understand that this is not what happens in our national curriculum. This is not what happens when we go to a preschool, nor in a primary school. Furthermore, for secondary school or tertiary education, when we leave our country and go into another jurisdiction. So it's very important because this thing is going to be what has to be ringing in our minds, has to be ringing in the minds of our youth officers of the district, in the minds of the chief youth officer, the minds of our consultant, our Kalinago council, and members of our community. So the rights. So the right of indigenous people's education is also protected by a lot of other indigenous rights. For instance, one of these is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So as a human person, as one of those guys, there's two schools of thought. There's some of those guys who believe that there's this magic man who made everything happen in 6 days. And there's some others who think that have gone through a series of evolutionary processes. Whichever one you choose to decide on, whichever one becomes your baby, nonetheless, you are from that human family and you have that right. So no one, I am not doing you a favor as a teacher. I taught for many years. I was not doing you a favor as a teacher. First of all, I was paid. And then because you have right to education, because I'm a paid educator, you have that right. And you have that also, as I said earlier, you have that responsibility to get the best benefits out of that right. Education is also under the rights of the child, people with disabilities, and all of those other big United Nations human rights areas. We have that education is a key part of it. So the goals, like I said earlier on, is that goal number 4 of the 2013 agenda, it calls for ensuring equal access. Very, very important. And it's not just equal access to primary, secondary, but to all levels of education. And it also includes vocational training, food and nutrition, electricity, plumbing, time. All this is very, very important. So again, I will say, I'll make the point again. I'm speaking here with my Kalinago cap. It's my Kalinago cap right here. Nothing else. That no one is doing you a favor when they offer vocational training. They do it because it's your right as a human person to access it. Your responsibility nonetheless is to go to this institution, go to this program, to empower yourself. Now, what we have found out is this. in spite of all those wonderful instruments, stuff on paper, and wonderful words, we find that it is not realized by all the people in the world. And to some extent, we have some trappings of it in the Kalinago territory. So it's a bit different between what normal people achieve, they have access to, and also what the indigenous people have access to. Nonetheless, like I said earlier, when we look at the Kalinago territory, we realize that we have access for preschools, 5 primary schools, 2 secondary schools, our state college, scholarship to a university abroad. But it's a right to take on these challenges and empower us. So, in a very, very simple way, this is what education is all about. Because if we don't know what we get into, if we don't know the meaning, even ourselves, if we don't know what it is to be indigenous, we have an issue. So I'll attempt to have a definition of make you understand what the concept of education encapsulates. So education is a process of facilitated learning. First of all, you must facilitate learning. And all it is the acquisition of knowledge, skills, values, beliefs, and habits. So that's one set of things. So like I said earlier again, when you look at operation on Dominica, we realize that there are deficiencies. And as young persons, you are part of having to evolve it to make it a more stronger institution. Now, education methods include storytelling. It includes discussions, teachings, training, and research. Normally, education takes place under the guidance of educators. But, however, important point, that's not. But learners may also need to educate themselves. So you have to go beyond the sphere of what is there, what is taught to you, to find information. That's what education is about. So you will hear these words in the older section of our community that those people, guys, are book smart, but they are not practical. They are intelligent, but they can apply certain issues. Because for a certain level, for a certain point of the education in Dominica, any kind of education, it wasn't a wholesome educational process. It's people repeat what they say, and there's a great Asian scholar who said that people, whenever we speak, we say of what we have learned or what was taught to us. But whenever we listen, it's quite the opposite. So people who speak a lot, that's basically what you do. And if you're in a situation where you're learning have deficiencies, your speech, your output, your writing will also have deficiencies. So we have to go beyond that scale to do that. So in a nutshell, this is what education is about. Now it is funny how all this came about. So the word education itself, it has a Latin base, it has a European base. So when we do this education for ourselves and we say we are following a Western universal education system, it's not a mystery. We shouldn't be surprised because the very word education comes out of the European construct. It is not something that comes out of a Kalinago. It's not tunubuku, which means knowledge, like we have about our language. It's not tunubuku. It's education. It comes out of the Latin word, Greek words to rear, to bring forth, to raise up, to erect. So when our education system is talking that notion that, and we have been taught, like people are taught in Europe, it should not be surprised to us. So that is very important to educate ourselves about this so we can move forward. So the format of education has been very, very simple, and we know it because throughout our history, we have not come to education, to indigenous education as yet. So indigenous education is not factored in at all. So what we know is this: education can take place in a formal or informal setting, and any experience that has a formative effect on the way one thinks, feels, acts, may be considered education. And the methodology we do it is called the pedagogy. Kind of scientific words, but very simple. What we have found out, especially in Dominica, is that education is commonly divided into stages. So you have to go through a system. And when I'm going to make a comparative analysis in a while, you will see that this is not what indigenous education is about. It's not exactly that. Because in this situation here, you have to go to academies. So you go to a kindergarten academy. If you are found fit, you are moved on to a primary school. And if you are found fit, you move on to a secondary school, and then a college, and a university. If you are found fit. So there are measurements that are given to you. So that's why we have standardized tests. That's why we have exams, because you have to meet the criteria. So if you are in, let's localize it, if you are in the Kalinago territory, and you are a wonderful craftsman, and you know how many strands of flour you need to make a basket, which is basically math, because you can do perimeter and length, and you can do all of this math things without a school, you may not pass the math exam. So this format here is what we now know here, far different from what we eventually talk to about indigenous education. So this is our format. The history of education is very interesting. A lot of the words you hear about education before a certain time, you will hear about prehistory. This is what I do all the time. You will hear prehistory and you hear pre-literate. So when we have prehistory, is basically saying what happened before something was wrote it down. And normally it's the European construct. So I have taken it off completely from my discussion. So I will call it ancient times. So education began in ancient times as adults train young in the knowledge and skills necessary in the society. So if you're in a society where you're hunting and you're gathering stuff, that is what you do. You learn to hunt good, to gather the best foods to survive. Ancient times. If you live in a civilization that build log houses, and in the forest, you know to cut down the trees, use the right log and the right moon, etc. And if you look at this carefully here, this history is already starting with our history as indigenous people. It is indigenous education. And if you realize as we go along, like I said a while ago in the format, it is not at all part of our education. Very interesting. I could find no other word no other way to put it, so I could pre-literate. It is basically saying that before people could read and write and understand symbols, education was also happening. And it was happening through oral stories and through imitation. So when we hear the Nancy stories, and when we say we talk about the oral histories or myths or legends, all of this is oral history. And all of this is what we have considered to be pre-literate, because it is not written. Very, very important. So the storytelling itself is very important. It is passed on knowledge and values and skills from one generation to the next. So what I would have learned from my father, what my father would learn from his father, and what I would have learned from my father's brother, my uncle, etc. All of this would be part of what was passed on. In history, and when you do history like I do as a scientist, as an academic discipline, there's a big difference between oral history and oral traditions. Oral history is what has been passed on to you, and oral tradition is what you're actually doing and how it manifests itself. There's a big difference. And for a very, very long time in the history of us, as part of the 370 million indigenous people in the world, all method was cancelled off. Cancelled off completely, and there was a positive push for always for Western education. Now, as cultures began to extend their knowledge beyond skills that could be ready to learn through imitation, that is where the formal education started developing. Now, I have argued that in the Kalinago territory in Dominica, where people island civilization, we could not get that formal education at all because there was an intervention. We were doing oral histories, we were gathering, we were doing things by imitating stuff. But our development was retarded, was cut off because Europeans came. So we never had a chance, not a chance in our life, to have our own going for formal education. Nonetheless, when you look at the history of Europe, they will have gone into their own. China will have gone into its own. And even when you look at America as a superpower, their own is a mirror effect of the European country. And that situation where indigenous knowledge, indigenous education doesn't exist at all. So, briefly, I put the history, we'll go to Rome and we'll go to individuals quickly. There was a philosopher called Plato, and most of the things we're doing today as people are learning from the European mindset, we have used Plato as a footnote. Plato, all of the stuff he's doing. Here, he formed what he called the Academy in Athens. And it was the first ever higher learning institution here. Now, also, the city of Alexandria in Egypt, in 330 BC, there was became kind of the birthplace of intellect. A lot of stuff was happening around that time. And actually, there was a massive library, one of the biggest libraries in the world, was in Egypt. And that was built in 3rd BC. 3rd BC. So about 300 years before the Common Era, what a lot of us have talked about the Book of Christ, that library is already set. And there was knowledge there collected over a period of time in the Middle East. Now what we found out is that when Rome fell apart, when Rome was kind of destroyed, a lot of the European civilization suffered. Careful, I'm saying that. European civilization suffered. European civilizations, not indigenous civilizations, because they were not following all of that course of action, because their knowledge base was never exploited by themselves. So it laid there resting for some time. When you look at China, for instance, even before this the Roman times, 551 years, in the set of blue, Confucius as a philosopher, he had different outlook on education, and he influenced all of his brothers in the Asian continent. So Korea, China, all of this were influenced by this philosopher. His disciples were searching for some kind of ruler who would have the ideas of what is good governance. Because again, like I said earlier on, we cannot separate governance and education. They wanted to say the idea. So for a very, very long time, education was portable. Wonderful poems were written. There was a philosophy, so people with Buddhism, for instance, they are following that philosophy in all of Confucius. We see through the historical process, through the historical archaeology, some aspects of Confucius-ness is in what we know as Christianness. All those people. So this Christianness we know now in our Western culture did not come out from nowhere. It came out of this positive evidence that it came out of this influence. So the education is filtering into our civilization. When you look at Europe again, after Rome fell, now that's a very, very important point because it's filtered down into our area in Dominica. The Roman Catholic Church took up the role to be the educator. So the Roman Catholic Church, when Rome fell apart, their role was to educate people. They became the sole literate scholarship in Western Europe. And they established schools all over the world. And now, when we look at the Kalinago territory, we look at Dominica, we see everywhere you see a church in Dominica, there's a school nearby, everywhere. Because at that time, during the colonial process, the church was the one to educate people. And the education would be more Catholic-based, Christianized religious pattern. However, in the Middle Ages, there's a lot happening in Europe. A lot of universities are set up, and during that time, Islam, Islam is not just a religion, but Islam for a very long time has been adding to education for a very long time. There's a book called the Islamic Gold Age, when they were leading in science and mathematics. As a matter of fact, if you get a map of the cosmos of the skies, more than 95% of the stars up in our galaxy are named after Islam people. Because there's so much they would have done. Then they got to a point where it got fettered, it got messed up. So Islam is not what it was in terms of education. So the Catholic was doing their bit, and Islam was also being lived. And if you notice, indigenous education is not there at all. It doesn't factor in. Now, there's a point on history of the Renaissance where there's upheaval, there's wonderful things happening in the history of the world, and we see that science is going on, intellectual inquiry, people are excited, people say that the earth is wrong, people are doing all kinds of stuff. Now, they say a lot of stuff. What was important for us here today is that in the history of the European civilization, they say this, and I didn't begin doing it, they say, missionaries and scholars, apart from what was happening in Europe, also brought back new ideas from other civilizations. Who are these other civilizations? That's the question. And then we understand that these other civilizations are our civilization in the Caribbean region, the other civilization in China, in Africa, etc. Nonetheless, although they say this, there is no clear indication as to what exactly they are, in my words, in my mind, what they are volleying from the civilizations. And that, when you look at the history of our system here, it is indigenous knowledge that they actually teach you, bring back. They say it, they are very unpassable. We should remember that they are stuff. They don't tell us exactly what they do. So a lot of what we learn actually are some part of what we have learned from their experience. Now, in our present time, briefly in our present time, in most countries today, full-time education, whether in school or otherwise, is compulsory for all children up to a certain age. In our system, I think it's up to 16, in some cases 18 years, and it's compulsory in our present time. UNESCO have calculated that for the next 30 years, more people receive formal education than in all of our human history so far. That's the prediction. Because, like I said earlier, there are a number of rights in the world that gives you right to education. So this is kind of our present situation. I see this in alternative learning. So I'm moving away from the normal format, the preschool, the primary school, the secondary school, the tertiary stuff. This is a form of stuff you go through. You get a certificate, you involve and stuff. But there's this happening. So although we consider alternative today to mean something new, it's not. It's something that has been forever. I'll give another part of that story. When we talk about alternative medicine, we heard a lot in the medical circles now. Alternative medicine. They feel bad. I argue that they feel bad to say it's indigenous medicine. They can't say it. The European people, they can't say it. So they say it's alternative. So they say to you, you can use some bush, you can use tea, etc. They don't want to give us the credit for it. But it's important that you learn because it is our knowledge. So they call it as alternative knowledge. In the very same way, they call it in academic circles alternative learning. So, after the public school system was widely developed in the 19th century, some parents just found that was nonsense. It was just mashing. They were discontented, like, what are they learning? Why am I learning trigonometry and stuff like that? So they got very, very upset. And there was a development as a reaction. These stuff are happening. So people started doing self-learning. They started going to private schools. And some people actually did the process of unschooling, of unlearning what they do. So this again was a condition that people like us who sat in schools and some North American Indians sat in schools and they would force a new language on them and they would understand concepts because they were not their language. We had to move away from it. And we have all of this. So for example, there are a lot of examples of alternative learning in the world. So it's not a new thing. So when you look at the Montessori school, this is an alternative school. If you guys know what it's about, it's basically you go to the school for the entire day and then you do different activities that are not structured. So that is one example. Another example is the Waldorf schools, all these kind of schools. We have French schools, Sand schools, Summerhill School, Walden Path, the People Good School, Sudbury Valley School, and we have something we call it open and classroom schools. So all of this is a response to the structure that we were learning. And this is the fact that we are coming to as part of the indigenous education. Because like I said again, before I said before is that while considered alternative today, most alternative systems have existed since ancient times. It's nothing new. People take credit, they put their name onto it, and they do a curriculum, and they get famous and make money out of it, but it's not theirs. I'll go back to that point. Missionaries and scholars also brought back new ideas from other civilizations. That's a very, very important point. Another part that influences us and becomes us as indigenous people also is this, what a concept called informal living. Very, very simple. It occurs in a variety of places such as the home and the work and through the interactions and relationships you see about people in society. It includes acquisition of cultural norms and manners, and very important, it's an ongoing process that also occurs in a variety of places such as out of school time, like what's happening now, summer school, etc., in youth programs like computer center, etc., and in media labs, where everybody is doing this stuff. So all of this is happening, and informal living is happening. There's no structure. No one tells me ABC and stuff like that. You are living in a setting that is not structured. And this set that is not structured is leaning towards our indigenous education. In a nutshell, we call it informal living. We also find that it is happening outside education institutions. So it's not in schools or in colleges or in preschools, etc. It's outside. And it is all happening outside of curriculum. So there's no language as curriculum, no science, etc. It's outside of all that stuff. And it's experiencing directly, in quotation here, it is experienced directly in its natural function of everyday life, and is often very, very spontaneous. So it is, that is the point we get to where people are learning stuff that they need to survive. You have a car, you have to change your tire, you learn to change your tire, and you save. You have to pay somebody $50 per tire. If you change your oil in the vehicle, it's very simple. Your fridge goes bad, you check the thermostat, the fan is spinning, you pull on the fan, you shake it down a little bit, you spray it back if it's already 40, and you're good to go. That is what it's about. In the very same way, you go past, you go hunting and gathering stuff, your bow and arrow are broken, you pull out something, you manage to do your stuff, you do not your father anymore, you did first, it was functional stuff. And this leads to our indigenous education itself. Now here's another concept that is important, self-learning. And that is a crucial thing for us in Kalinago because we think, I for very long have thought that I can only be taught by somebody else. And we never in our mind thought that there must be an inclusion. We must stick our indigenous knowledge into the system. That's what it's to do. And it has to be like me and to do those because we have to look at the models that they're teaching. Because at one point in my life, I learned as a young man is what they call chop and drop. You should write some stuff, he spoke to you, try to write something, he irritated about it, do. I was in charge. And the teacher stood up there and spoke to you and you have no opinion on this. He said to you, this is black. He said, no, sir, this is silver. Well, shut up. Sit down. This is black. So that's what it was. That's what it was. So the models have to change. And now also look at the content within the format. So for instance, I enter for a number of years. When we teach you do an introduction, you say, good morning class, how are you today? What's it going on? Today we go to math and we're going to do consumer arithmetic. We're going to learn to find a discount on items. Then we give an example and then you try, etc., etc., etc. You just go. And then at some time in the history of my evolution as a teacher, I forgot about some children are ready. So maybe I should say, what do you know about consumer arithmetic? What do you know about getting discount? And then I realized that out of the 10 children here, maybe 6 would go to this. My job is here, to talk to one another in groups, check this. So basically what I'm saying is that the format, how we do the content within the format and the system itself, this is what indigenous knowledge and education is about. It's an injection. It's not a removal, it's an injection of the knowledge. So the prospers and the landladies and the Nietzsche books have to come into the system, into the school, and teach them. And they have to be welcomed by the education system, welcomed by the teachers and the principals. Because sometimes we find that they have problems also, that they have no consciousness of what should happen. And they only do what is sent to them. So I was in a situation that said, I mean, she said, whatever she said, you teach. So there's no injection. So that is what indigenous culture is about. Now, after in a post-colonial context, and that's after colonization, the growing recognition of these religious education methods can be a response to the erosion and loss of indigenous knowledge and language, and especially in our case. When we come to this right track, I can speak Canada language. But I speak Africa. And then I have a toast, I said, I'm a Kabutu. And I said, doing this. Because at some point in our history, the person and child education is white. So when we talk about indigenous education, we have to find a way to do that. There are wonderful programs around the world of regeneration of the language. It has to go through a process, it has to go through serious training, and it has to be some of us to take on the rules from what process study, language club, and stuff, and to extend it. Because for a fact, we all can be lawyers or doctors or engineers. Some of us have to be activists, some of us have to be researchers into the history. What is important, very, very important here is that it can enable indigenous communities to reclaim and revive their language and cultures, and so to improve the educational success of indigenous peoples. So it's very, very important when we can move and we understand that. But we can't make the move unless we know about it. Knowledge is power. You know something, and somebody knows you know something, you will treat you differently. So you have to express that when you're in your classrooms and when you're in discussion. So, there's some brief examples. So, there are examples in the world we can follow. For instance, in the American classrooms, the structure reflects the origination of these communities. It eliminates the distinctions between community and classroom and makes it easier for students to relate to the material. Effective classrooms model of the social structure of indigenous communities are typically focused on a group of cooperative learning that provide an inclusive environment. It is different hours. This is what happened in ancient times. In our times, you are a competitor. So you learn what you learn for yourself. You got your 90% and he got his 60 and you laugh. And that was it. Only find out that he got 60 and he now is your parent and doomed. Because you did not help him at all. That is what the education is about. So the construct of the European mind was to set you to you alone. You are partners, you self-contained. Everything is around you. You're the function of our knowledge. That's what we're talking. But when you look at the indigenous classrooms now, we have to be inclusive because when you go back into the community, the person who was the zero, the person who was laughed at by our friends, they are part of the community, they are part of the leadership, they are part of the circle, and we find when we dismiss them, we have to take on responsibility. So we have to become a leader, and we want to know why, my God, they don't understand it. Because we're trained to separate them from ourselves. It's very, very important. So it has to create, in the example of the American classrooms, that create an inclusive environment. Where we learn people do stuff in group ways. It's much easier to do stuff in group ways than to do things by yourself. So some classroom practices we have seen and important for you as students to help to move on and to champion is that the key factor for indigenous success is the student-teacher relationship. For instance, there was a issue in the Kalinago territory where all our teachers were from outside. When a gentleman comes from Woodford, quote unquote, and Ned from Woodford comes into the school, and he doesn't understand the indigenousness of you as an individual, he treats you differently. And that is one thing we have to dismiss and in the classrooms that we're going to have, in the sense that you're going to have as an indigenous person. Because the relationship has to be a fast-paced one. There has to be a situation where you learn, and also the teachers from outside are different, they also learn. So there has to be marriage. So the classrooms have to be socially constructed in a way that the teacher shares the control of the classroom with the students. So you see that, you upon the head boy, a head girl, a class prefect, they do it, it's been done, but it's not done, And as young was in the college, in the secondary school, you have to advocate for all these things. For example, there's a Mazawa community in Mexico. Teachers have observed to let the students move freely about the classroom by working in order to consult with all the students. Imagine this. When you imagine the day, those of you in secondary school, when you can leave your desk and walk over and say, Jack, what are you doing? Let me help you out. You can't do that. You have to sit in your place, but if you do it, you are ruling your place, you're disrupting the class. So this is something we have to help those who have control of that system to understand, because you can, I thought of this for some time, they could drink and eat in class and move around. The only thing they could do was to chew gum. It's annoying. So they could go into the corner and get snacks, normally flush and just drink the water. An education officer came in and I got, so it's kind of picture, I was like, no, I know what it's going to be. How can I show you class 18 and stuff like that? By far, they would do more stuff when you free up and drinking water, shaking and rather than foreigners. See, on the almost like now, I feel like we need policy. And they're very significant years. Moving around is a different story. So I have an example here. So I have this one already. There's a Yucatan Maya community from 1 to 5 years old. They're going to go on church at home, observing adult activities, and important, and being allowed to engage in adult activities. Do not misunderstand this at all. So, in that community, people from 1 year to 5 years, they are able to church, they're able to wash and cook and do stuff. And they also engage in adult activities. So they can choose what station to watch. They can choose what food to go to buy. They can choose to change, to want to fix something on the vehicle. These are adult activities, but in our society we are accepted because a child has to use of a place and there's a place for the other. So these are some examples that inculcate indigenous education. And this is all the stuff that we actually do to survive. I'd like to close. There are a lot of benefits to indigenous education. So if you, I have this here because even some of us don't appreciate it, even if we are indigenous. So I'd like to advise you about this here. So for example, for learners and instructors, the inclusion of these methods into schools often enhances education effectiveness by providing an education that adheres to an indigenous person's own perspective, experiences, the language, the customs, as they move from children into the adults. For those people who are not indigenous people, and also the teachers, such an education often has the effect of raising awareness. So that's what I stick up in here. That is why I'm thinking that if we have to look at the curriculum, it can't stay in our primary schools alone. It must be in every other school. So they become aware of what is happening, what is important to us. So it's very important because the non-indigenous persons sometimes have a serious effect. When I look at this school, I'm having that now in something I'm doing, an academic paper, the dissection of the Canada tertiary education. Everybody who goes to class goes to secondary school and an office. Everybody who goes there today, they're between the age of 11 and 15. That is when they're in crisis. And we are surprised when some guys come up here and can't deal with about us. We're surprised. We take them, we send them to a different culture. We are surprised when we hear more black slams and hip-hop stuff being done. We're surprised. Oh, we shouldn't be surprised because we send them to a community that's where they grow up and they have to find identity. When you're between 12 and 15 years, you're looking for who you are. I don't know who I am. 2 years after I was growing up, I want to have a long hair. I want to have Afro to make a boxer. I was in crisis because I'm of mixed heritage. I was in crisis. So when we send Mr. Roach, when we send our children to Youth Development Division Program Class, I have 20 men and I have 5 and the men talking more and they want more stuff and I want to.
President of the Youth Development Organization in the Kalinago territory, Ms. Lunel Green, other members of the Youth Development group of the Kalinago territory and all the young people, a very pleasant good morning to you all.
Good afternoon.
Brothers and sisters, young people, ladies and gentlemen, World Indigenous Peoples Day has been around for some time. And you will recall last year we attempted Dominica Indigenous Peoples Cultural Festival, and we chose the 9th of August to host that festival because we wanted to do it in conjunction with the World Indigenous Peoples Day. And that is why we hosted it this year. Last year, we were unable to host it this year because it happened to be a very expensive venture, and then to generate the funds to host the program is not very easy, so we took a decision that we do it every 2 years, and that is why we do not have it this year. But I'm very pleased that this year the young people are coming together and recognizing that day, and that was declared by the United Nations. The theme of the World Indigenous Peoples Day this year is education, and I think Brother Joseph Frederick had a very good presentation on education. Now, as indigenous people, most indigenous people around the world are usually considered second-class citizens in their own lands, and that is not exceptional for us here in Dominica. And the United Nations recognized that we had a first decade of indigenous people and a second decade for recognizing indigenous people. And within that decade, the United Nations, together with the indigenous people, formulated a documentation called the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And that was passed in September of 2013, if I'm not mistaken. No, 2007. All right, it's off my head a little, but that declaration was accepted, and at the time it was passed, 4 nations of the world apparently opposed it, and they were very powerful nations. They were the United States of America, the Canadian government, the Australian government, and the New Zealand government. And there were some other African countries who actually abstained from voting, but these nations voted against. However, since then, all these nations have voted and supported the rights of indigenous people under the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. So that is a very powerful document that we as indigenous people have, and we need to know what is in there, what rights we have in that documentation that gives indigenous people rights. And that is a form of education for us. And that is very, very important to us. Now, as I said, we practically, the United Nations recognize that indigenous people were marginalized all over. And we heard Brother Joseph talk about the deficiency of our education and language. And I remember at one time, it's on a document, but I didn't have the time to actually go to research it and get the facts before it. But I know there are several hundred languages that are disappearing from the world, and it's indigenous language, and that happens on an annual basis. We are losing languages to each other. And we no exception here, because we are losing our language here. We've lost, not we're losing, but we lost our language. And gradually we are attempting to see what it is that we can put together to retrieve our language, and we can say. But the President said you could say Mabrika, Mabrika. And something from them you would say like, in your own language, how are you doing, God? And in that language you would say, Kikuni Kaikarihi. Alright? Like, how are you doing, my brother? And you would answer, Ati Kaikarihi. And then you say, everything good? Kaima. I say, and it goes on and on. We can say 1 or 3 little dialects and phrases in that. But we actually lost the language, and we'll be very happy to learn back our language. And in that respect, we have to recognize the theme that that is proposed to us for this year's observance of World Indigenous Day. Brothers and sisters, as an indigenous people, what happened to us is no fault of ours. What happened to us happened to all other indigenous people around the world. And what is happening to us is the impact of colonization. Because when these Europeans who actually colonized the New World, that includes the whole of the American continent, North, South, Central, and the Caribbean, their objective was to come here, to take everything that they could take from us, the gold, the silver, the precious stones, the lands for agricultural purposes, and to generate, and then actually, when they saw so much fertile lands that they had, they realized how they could introduce agriculture and how beneficial agriculture could be for them. Then actually, they tried their own people to do slavery on the plantations, and that failed. Then they turned to Africa and they developed the triangular trade, and they brought the Africans down here. Every Caribbean island was occupied by our ancestors at the time. And so with the impact of colonization, they committed mass genocide, killed practically all our people, the Taino people, or the Arawakan people, and the Kalinago people. And at the end of the day, the few of us who survived, practically we survived in Dominica because Dominica gave us refuge through the Atlantic Ocean, the thick rainforest, and the rugged terrain. That is what protected us. We did not have guns and gunpowder and weapons to stand up to the aggression of the Europeans. And so they destroyed the lives of the indigenous people. In South America, they destroyed great empires. You have of the pyramids of Egypt, that great empire that was built in early civilization. You have very little talk of the Mayan Empire and the Aztec Empire in Central and South America. All right, we had them in Mexico, we had them where Evo Morales is the president of that country. It doesn't come to my mind right now. In Bolivia. All right, we had those empires down there, and they were very powerful empires, very strong in astrology, knowing what was going around them at the time. They were very, very powerful people, and today we have very little about them. So all of those things impacted on on our people down here today, even in the Kalinago territory, because as you know, we occupied the whole of Dominica at one time. They chased us out from Rosewood, they chased us out from all the West Coast area, and even only the names practically that remain. And there's a map on the KB that will give you all the names of the villages around Dominica that our people occupied and lived at the time. The trees, the medicine, the birds, the fish, most of that was named by our people. And so we've lost most of those things. However, that is just to display how much impact colonization had upon us today. And at the end of the day, when education was introduced in the early enough in the Kalinago territory, because as I always remember, there was an American anthropologist by the name of Frederick Ober who came in after 400 years of colonization to see the status of the Kalinago people. And when he came down here, there was already a small school built below where the old police station, the present Catholic Church is. There was a police station there before, and below that, just below that, there was a little twin house down there, and a little lower down there, where the first school was built. Then the second school was built below the old church, and then the other school was built where this concrete structure is where we know it to be there now. And then you have the school now moving up to St. C, and the temporary building was up in Badaka, but our school has moved from one point to another. So what happened at the time, the Europeans would call our people and introduce them, ask them to make peace at meeting time. And when they would surround them, they would declare war on them, and our people had to jump and escape through windows and run away to save themselves. So because of that, there was always fear that whatever the Europeans presented to us was not genuine. And so it took a long time for our people to settle down and actually accept the education system that was put on us. When it was put on us, we know our people could speak Patois because of the French influence that was down there. And the schools that we grew up in was actually English schools. And so we had a problem because colonization themselves had a problem. They did not want you to learn each other's language. And so when we would speak Patois, everybody would say, And so that took some time again for people to adjust. Now you have to remember, it's very, very, very funny because you realize that indigenous people had their own language, they had their own culture, they had their own way of life. And at the end of the day, somebody just come from wherever they came from, they plant their flag on their land, and they just claim, I claim this land in the name of the King and Queen of Spain, England, France, wherever they wanted to take it to be. And all of a sudden they wanted to one, point out where the gold was, if you couldn't point out where it would go, accept Christianity, as was expressed by Dr. Joseph Frederick. If you did not accept that, you would die. And at the end of the day, when they would teach you whatever they want to teach you, their poems, the maps, whatever they would teach you, it had to be in the language. And sometimes our people that are accustomed to that language have difficulty catching up in that system of education. Now, not only that, but education at that time was not so focused as now. It was not really, we did not see the importance of education then like now. Everybody wants to go to school now, learn and come out with a degree. In my school days, it was said, if you would leave school with a school leaving certificate, you would be able to pick up any job in Dominica. Alright? Just imagine that. Any job in Dominica. Today you must have a degree for you to have a decent job. And that shows how the system evolves after a period of time. So all of those things happen in our education system, and that is why we need to know those things so that we can understand and know how we adjust as an indigenous people with what we have. Brother Frederick made mention about the different ways of learning and how our people manage. We had our herbal medicines. We had the way we maneuver the ocean. We had the way we hunted in the forest, how we go to seek food and save food for future days. And all of these were a type of education that our people had and we enjoyed. And these were very important ways because now the medicines that they give to us, all of us are very computer literate today. Anytime the doctor prescribes a medicine for you, you take the name of the medicine, you go to your computer and you Google it, and you will see how much side effects that these medicines have. And so that gets you scared even to put that medicine in your mouth. And you know how important a role our herbal medicine played in the lives of our people before. So we have some very, very important lessons to project as indigenous people and to adopt and to promote as indigenous people. He also emphasized the fact that the people who came here and colonized us, the empires, the big pharmaceutical companies, they come here and they tell you they want to do a research in the Kalinago territory to study what you have, your culture, your herbal medicine, your way of survival and things of that. And at the end of the day, when they get the information, they go out there, they research it, they put it in a lab, they see how potent our medicines are, they go out, they copyright it, and they take advantage of it, and they sell it back to us, making millions and billions. And that we as indigenous people need to know, need to understand, and need to recognize ourselves as indigenous people and stand by who we are so that we can grow together as one people and protect our resources, protect our knowledge, protect that we have. Only when we have that understanding, we can go forward strongly as a people. Other than that, until we are divided. The unfortunate thing today in Dominica, I maintain that we have about roughly between 10 and 15% of the national population who either indigenous or have indigenous bloodline in them. Maybe more too, all right? And in our days gone by, right here, because of the overwhelming non-Kalinago population that we had in this country, we felt sometimes we were ashamed of standing by and say that I am Kalinago. All right, I am carried, so to speak, as it was. All right, we were ashamed of standing who we are, our identity, and based upon that, we realized that nowadays it's becoming a little different, and so we are standing by promoting that. But however, there is something very important I would like to project here. I was very disappointed not too long ago when I was invited to some schools for the graduation. And when I looked at the children in the classroom going up for the graduation, I saw more non-Kalinago up there, out there as the children of the Kalinago territory out there than Kalinago people. And we need to reflect on that. What is the cause of that? What is the impact of that? Because it is at one time it is good to be Kalinago, but another time it is not good to be Kalinago. And I need some form of reflection from that, because I figure we have among the greatest history in the world. We stood up to defend the Caribbean. We stood up to defend Dominica. We stood up to defend our rights as indigenous people. And now that we are on the verge with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, an instrument that the United Nations will give us to stand up and fight for our rights. With the ILO Convention, another arm of the UN, 169, giving us that right. With a Carib Act that some other indigenous people of the world do not have access to, and we have it. When I move around in the indigenous peoples land out of Dominica, there are people who do not have no access to those rights, to those instruments, not even recognized by the state. And when you look at it, you see those people are displaying very strongly their regalia, their culture, their dress, their people how they act. And we down here cannot recognize who we are with that already. So this one that I think the majority of our people, need to shape up, need to ponder, and need to recognize your roots, your ancestors, the role our ancestors played, the struggle that we have gone through, and to be a little grateful to the sacrifices that they have made so that we could live today. Before I end here, I also want to say, other than these principles, brothers and sisters, there are other things internally that impact on our lives. And some of the things that I'd like to call on, especially the young people, is the principles, the morals, the values that make you a Kalinago person. And the things that impact negatively on us, we need to recognize it. For instance, we cannot speak positively if we do not look at the negatives. And we see the impact of drugs and alcohol on our people. And at the end of the day, anytime we have, in our layman's term, we have a CO, you see especially how our young men would behave. And it's that you would hear the things that they would say, the pronouncements that they would make. And society generally doesn't go down well for us. And I would like to call on our people to recognize the weaknesses and try to build on them. I would also recognize that, as Brother Frederick said, that in the Kalinago territory, I think we have a very good education system so far as projected. We have a preschool system in the conventional system. We have a preschool system, we have primary school structures, we have secondary school access, though not in the Kalinago territory. Then you have the state college that people have access to the college. And the government is supporting those programs. And today, more than ever before, you have university education exposed to our people. You have, first of all, I want to recognize the late Lucy Douglas. When we formed this Cuban scholarship, and that was turned down by the Virginia Charles administration because Cuba was a communist country. And through that scholarship, Dr. Warren Sanford, Dr. Thomas, Dr. Eric, Dr. Frederick, practically all our doctors today that we can boast of, they obtained a Cuban scholarship for education. And that was the scholarship that was available to them. I was not too satisfied with that because I heard the complaints that our people had, how difficult it was to get money across to Cuba to support the children in Cuba, and Cuba was going through some difficult times. So when in 2005 I went to Barbados for a European Union meeting, I took the opportunity and I went to the University of the West Indies, where I had a meeting with Dr. Hilary Beckles, who was the then principal of the university, and then I found the Kalinago, the African Indigenous Scholarship Program, and that is started with me and Dr. Beckles. It was not only them because we had Sir Sridhar Ramphal, the former Commonwealth Secretary General, We had Sir George Ali, who was the Dean of the University of the West Indies. We had Sir Lewin Nichols, who was the President of the Caribbean Development Bank, among others. We sat together judging the Unsung Heroes program for the first Caribbean Bank in Barbados. And so I had access to practically all the directors of the university when I made my case. So I had good backing and I received the scholarship. And today you have Dr. Jose Frederick. Mr. Jose Frederick, doesn't doctor. Doesn't doctor, but hoping to, yeah? Yes. Mr. Jose Frederick, who made a very good presentation here, who benefited from that scholarship. We had Claudia Sanford, who was the deputy political leader from that program. You have Pearl Williams, my own daughter, who today is a magistrate on the island because of that same program. You have Will Rossi, and you have close to about 30 or so persons who benefited from that scholarship program in the Caribbean territory. And now, recently I want to inform you that with the marketing officer from the University of the West Indies, we did another program at the UWI trying to open the doors of the St. Augustine in Trinidad and Mona in Jamaica under the same program. So you will have more opportunities for the indigenous scholarship program coming in the future. Let me, before I leave here, thank the Ministry of Kalinago Affairs, Mr. Jose Frederick, and Ms. Donnell, Green, and all the other organizers who put this program here together and brought all of us here together. Let me recognize the work that we have done, and I would hope that we're not only doing it once in a lifetime, but we're going to continue because of our finished education. We're going to continue educating our people in the Kalinago territory to make them, to give them support, encouragement, that we normally want, motivation, that we need to stand up together to continue fighting the battle. Because you might not be fighting physically, but every day we have to go through the struggles, and when new policies come, new things come around, we know that it is a struggle, it is a fight that we have to fight for our rights. So let me just thank them for bringing me here together, giving me the opportunity to speak to them. Much policy, but we don't take it limited. Thank you.
Members of the community, of the Kalinago community, of course the executive members of the newly formed Youth Council, extremely important. My colleague here, Brother Roach, the Chief Development Officer, other members of staff from the Division of Youth and other government departments. I need also to say that I, of course, am recognizing Mr. Frederick. I need to remember he wears two hats today. His hat as a Kalinago person and his hat as representing the Minister of Kalinago Affairs. Would you please extend our best wishes to the Minister, and we hope that the decisions in the Cabinet today will result to the benefit of the Kalinago people as well. Thanks for the opportunity. Yesterday we had a discussion and we said, well, look, I was asked that I should make a presentation. My purpose in Dominica this time, I should be in Dominica for a period of 6 months. I think 1 month has already gone. And it is the government of Dominica approached the Commonwealth Secretariat saying that, look, we had a national youth policy in 2004, and that is now 12 years. And therefore there is need to review that national youth policy to make sure there is a new one that is taken into consideration the changes in Dominica. And after a process, I was asked by the Commonwealth Secretariat, what they call the Commonwealth Fund for Technical Cooperation. I don't know how much you all know about the Commonwealth, but the Commonwealth, I will tell you, is much more than the Commonwealth representative using words in Dominica that people felt offended by. The Commonwealth has existed for a long time. The Commonwealth has contributed. There's been a lot of work done on the question of indigenous peoples. There's been a lot of work done on the question of education and development, on youth development. In fact, the youth development program of the Commonwealth came into being in 1973. Many of our own Caribbean leaders took part in that decision,
and indicated at the time the countries were beginning to move into independence, and those leaders felt it was important for the young people of the Caribbean countries, of the Commonwealth members, who were coming out of the colonial period. It was important for the young people to have the opportunity for development, their own personal development, for the environment to be one that could assist them in developing so that they could contribute to the development of those countries that were just becoming independent. So the Commonwealth has played a role there. So the Commonwealth has decided it's going to support Dominica in reviewing the youth policy, and I have the privilege of representing the Commonwealth and of participating in that process, working with my colleagues at the Youth Division and the other partners in getting this process going. I'm going to tell you also before we go from the onset that my own expectation of the youth policy is that there is going to be clearly the issue of Kalinago youth has to occupy a very prominent place within the national report. And that for instance, as part of the consultative processes that we're going to have, and that's the community-based one, there is one that is going to be held specifically for the Kalinago. Not that, what we have discussed, I think yesterday briefly with Mr. Frederick here, that quite apart from what can be coming out of those consultations and will be recorded, we would want the established organizations, the representative organizations, be it the local council, the youth council, like the development officers in the Ministry of Kalinago Affairs, to pull together. Because sometimes in those short consultations, you can miss out. We would like them to come together, to collaborate and pull it together a proper position, paper, document, you want to call it, on the state of youth in the Kalinago territory, and what are you recommending that form part of the policy. Okay? I'm asking that because we don't want just about the things we are hearing to draw conclusions and say this is what is needed. We want you to document what you believe is necessary, what you believe should be in the policy representing your people. Okay, so that's a task that you all have to work on. The Kalinago Youth Council, Mr. Frederick is quite able to take that task and lead the process. You have your council to do that. We will be expecting that, and you will submit the submission to our chief, Mr. Roach, so that you will be sure that you are well represented in the youth policy. Having said that, let's just proceed a bit with the presentation. I don't know if you can see that quote here. The youth policy that we are developing, there's certain things about it that is quite very, very important. Traditionally, the way that young people are treated in many areas, by governments sometimes, by the family oftentimes, by organizations and agencies, is that young people are seen and treated as problems that they need to solve. Society normally tries to see young people as a problem that they have to solve. They see young people as a threat to the society because young people come in different. They may say things differently, they may have a different way of approaching things. And usually the society, the established, the pattern in society is one that see those young persons as threats. Okay? They see, one of the things that the research is showing is that mostly all of the problems our society experiences in developing, these affect young people worse than they affect other groups in the society. So for instance, if in countries where you see crime and violence being a very serious problem, you will see it looks as though there's a youth problem because more often than not, you will see it affecting young people more. And so therefore, people start to jump and say, they're young people, they're the ones committing the crime, they're the ones doing it. And again, they see young people as a problem to be solved. The philosophy of this policy is going to be, no, young people are not a problem to be solved. Okay? It is going to be that young people are a vital resource. Okay? Your chief has made and given some very serious history. You heard our brother Frederick here, he gave us some serious challenges, told us some of the historical contributions that your people have made into the development of the society of humankind. Okay? The only way that this can continue and you can build upon it is if there is investment in you as young people. Is if you as young people have that opportunity to continue to build upon it, to continue to carry the flag, so to speak, for your community. So therefore you cannot be a problem. You cannot be treated as a problem. You have to be seen as a vital resource. And that resource, one has to invest in that resource. Whether it is the local council, whether it is the government, for the youth development division, but they have to invest in that resource. Okay? So you don't want prescriptions of pharmaceuticals to say, let us treat them that way, whatever. No. It is about creating the opportunity for the young people to participate in their own development. So that is the philosophy. Now, I talk about youth policy. Let's run quickly through what is a youth policy. Just a few points that will kind of give you an idea of what a youth policy is. Right? A youth policy, and I think Jose said earlier, when you have a youth policy, do not believe it is somebody somewhere set a gift for you. That hey, they're young people, but we feel good about them, we want to get a gift. Right? Youth policy supposed to recognize that you as young people have rights. You have a right to participate in your society. You have a right to education. You have a right to well-being. You have a right to safe environments, friendly society for you to live in. And therefore, what the youth policy does is try to a kind of a plan of action, a framework to capture that. So the youth policy kind of sets out a vision for what is called empowerment. You heard that word before today about empowerment. Empowerment is not about giving you power over somebody else. Empowerment is really about you finding yourself so that you know who you are and what your rights are and how you work with each other to meet a common objective, whether it's to improve your family, improve your community, improve yourself. Okay? So that is what youth policy does. Youth policy has different parts. This is multifaceted. It will speak to education, the right to proper education. It will speak to what we call your economic rights, the right to work, okay, the right to own a business, the right to own property, okay, the right to be able to take care of yourself and take care of your family. It will speak to the question of participation, the right to participate in decisions that affect you and affect your community, affect your country, okay, to participate in those decisions. And it speaks to both the rights and the responsibility, as Jose said earlier. It speaks about well-being, to ensure that in order for you to be a productive person, you have to be well, you know? So it speaks about you having access to proper health care and access to proper nutrition and all of those things, so that you as a young person could be able-bodied, productive member of your community. The youth policy is also what we call a concrete and a transparent strategy. Concrete in the sense that it is not, the youth policy has things in that you went to show what it's saying. That is not that is. The youth policy has to be clear in definitive terms. If this is what is preventing you from being the best young person that you would like to be, then it has to speak clearly as to what action is going to be taken to address that particular problem. So it has to be concrete. Not like you know how sometimes people speak. I'm not in Dominica alone. When you listen to politicians speak in parliament or whatever, they have a way that they speak. You know, they will tell you we shall produce so and so, we shall deliver so and so, if so and so. And you know, there's always a kind of a battle of different things. So the youth policy has to be clear and precise. Okay? So if the issue is about programs and projects to provide sustainable employment for young people in your territory, it has to be clear in terms of that. Okay? Not no mama guy kind of, you know, smart talk. And it has to be transparent. Not a thing again that you are too short and say it has to be transparent, it has to be open and available to you, you have to understand it. So if, when that youth policy is finished, for instance, and you speak to, whether Mr. Roach, you speak to my sister here from the Eastern Territory, she has to be in a position, she has a responsibility to explain to you what that policy is saying, anything, if you're not clear on it. It is not something that they have it there and they tell you, say, when the policy, I never see a copy, and they say, well, I have it there, you lock up somewhere there, and no, it has to be clear, it has to be transmitted, available to you. The youth policy is also used to plan. So when you have a policy, for instance, you have a policy that may be paid for 5 years, the Ministry of Youth now can take that policy and plan activities for the year, or for 2 years, or for 3 years. Because once the policy is established, whatever activities that the Division of Youth will be implementing has to be the activities that are from the policy. Okay? Now, it is not just the Division of Youth. The Kalinago Youth Council, because it contributed to the youth policy, has a role to play in implementing the policy as well. Okay? So that when the Kalinago Youth Council say next year is planning its activities for the year, or the National Youth Council is planning its activities for the year, a lot of the program has to stick to what was in the National Youth Policy. Because the policy, maybe the government department is taking coordination of the policy, but the policy does not belong to SCERIT, or does not belong to the government of Dominica. The policy, once it's completed, belongs to the people of Dominica. The government of Dominica, you have given that authority to coordinate and act on your behalf. So they facilitate the process, but the policy belongs to you. So the NYC, as I said to my brother out there, the communications officer, as for the president, you know, the NYC has equal responsibility as the Division of Youth in ensuring that the policy is implemented. And that is why it is critical that the NYC, the National Youth Council, the Kalinago Youth Council, and others have equal responsibility to participate in and contribute to the putting together of the youth policy. Okay? The policy, a good thing about the policy as well, you could know if your policy is good or it's making sense. Because the policy is supposed to define the perception that the society has of young people. Now, we are doing a policy that will be documented. They've had policies before. You've heard our distinguished chief and you've heard Jose earlier tell you what happened to indigenous youth and culture over the years. That was a policy that the colonial authority to do that. And it affected youth, so that was their youth policy. From the standpoint of the Africans who were brought here in the post-emancipation, after slavery ended, and they said they gave freedom to the slaves. They had a situation going for all 100 years where young people, the former slaves, okay, they had no access to primary education, all of those things, because while the slavery came to an end, but the planters still wanted to have cheap labor. And they know if people are going to school, then the cost of labor are going up. So they denied them the opportunity to proper education so that they could have them as a cheap source of labor. That was the youth policy of that time. There was a policy that they had to work with indigenous people, that are the youth and others, because they wanted to keep them in a way that they would not be able to understand and own their rights and challenge the authority, the colonial authority. So that was the youth policy at that time. Okay? So if we're doing a youth policy today, and we say we are a modern and civilized society, the youth policy is supposed to picture how that country, how that organization is treating the young people of today. Yeah? If we say we are a democratic country, it's supposed to show that we see young people as having a democratic right. If we talk about international human rights charter, we see young people as having a right. That policy is supposed to show. Okay? Now, the purpose of the youth policy, quickly. The youth policy does a few things. The youth policy is supposed to, in doing the policy, you have to investigate, for want of a better word, investigate what are the situations, the living experiences, the challenges, the opportunities, the problems affecting young people. You need to investigate that. And you're not investigating that from a standpoint of hearsay, or I think that is what it is. That is why in the process we have for Dominica, there is a national youth survey that has been undertaken by the statistics department. The same way there is the census survey, there is one going on now. In addition to that, we have the community consultations with young people, and everyone here in this community, right? So that is to find out what is your situation, what are you saying, what are your dreams and aspirations, who would you like to be in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years, okay? So once that has been established, okay, the next stage is to develop the concrete goals and objectives. So we found out this is the situation with young people, this is the goal of the thing, this is the objective. And then the next phase, which is the bigger one here, then develops the programs, the activities, the strategies that not just the division of youth, but here the Kalinago, the council, the youth council, the national youth council, division of youth, Ministry of Health, the Prime Minister's office, all of them will have a role to play. Office of the President in implementing those things. That's the purpose of the policy. It is to kind of define what are the challenges, what's the youth situation in the country. Having identified that, develop clearly defined goals and objectives, and then you have programs and activities that you include in there to meet those goals and the objectives. There are some principles, there are some principles that I want to mention quickly in youth policy. Because youth policy, again, is not, and this one for sure, is not going to be something that, they have a phrase we used in St. Lucia called pagar. It anyhow. It has no weight, it has no structure. That's not a youth policy. Youth policy, and this one here, we have to ensure, and you have a role to play that is built on certain fundamental principles. One of the principles is that the policy must be built in a way that it does not think as though it's a favor somebody is doing to us young people. That is what it's called. It has to be rights-based. You heard Mr. Federico just say about the rights. It has to be rights-based. It has to recognize that when you talk about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and you talk about the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and you talk about the rights of indigenous people, all of those rights are also rights that young people have. And therefore, a policy must recognize those rights. When we talk about economic empowerment and decent work for young people, it is talking about that not as a standpoint of maybe Mr. Darrow or Mr. Sterrett or Mr. Linton giving us our work. No, it's not about that. It's about you having a right to work as a young people, and therefore the government, the agencies have a responsibility to create the environment to get decent work for you. Yeah? That is what it is. The other principle that has to be evidence-based, meaning that we cannot sit down and write a policy by saying, boy, I think that is what them people down there want. Or them people in Castle that is what they want. Or them people in Granby, that is what they want. No. Evidence. That's why we have the youth survey. go in there and find out what is the situation. So when we arrive at something, it is backed up by the evidence, the data, what you tell us, what we find, what is in the research that has been done. Okay? So it's not what we think or what we believe is the thing. Another principle of the youth policy and the code to follow is that of youth participation. You cannot have a policy building for young people or develop for young people and you say, okay, wait there, I do it for you, I do it for you. No. Young people have to participate because this is one of the reasons why we have the community consultation. Right? This is one of the reasons why we have the community consultation. And I might take the opportunity to throw a little pick on at Mr. Barron here. I have the name right? Yes. Mr. Barron. Hitherto now, the National Council is missing in action. And we would like the National Council to come on board in that seriously. Because you have a responsibility to make sure that the youth voice is in that thing from the beginning to the end, if there is an end at all. And I talk about it, not just the policies finished, but the implementation. Alright? I just want to pick on my guys yesterday. I live in Trinidad, and that's the basis of Trinidad is pick up. You have to be able to take it. If you represent the people, because oftentimes we just give politicians a lot of licks and say they're doing nonsense. And they do nonsense. But when you see, we decide to represent people in Kalinago Youth Council and National Council, lead by example. Represent, be present, be a nuisance. Let them so governor, but now I'm troublesome. Everybody are here giving us journal about Kalinago affairs. But never let them say that you were not present. Yeah? Go to the ones. The other one is that the principle of the policy has to be integrated and holistic. We can't write a policy that we're speaking about employment. It has to talk about everything, about your health, about your safety and security in your community, about your right to engage the relationship between you and your elders in the community. All of those things have to be integrated. It has to talk about education, about health, about work. Okay? Everything has to be involved, and so it has to be holistic. It has to be integrated because our vision is that when the policy is pulled together, let's assume that there is some challenges that young people are facing. You know, Natasha? I guess I can pronounce the name too earlier. The Fatih? I can't remember. If there are some challenges that the young people here are facing, the intervention, the action, should not just, it may appear on the surface is a health problem. Let's just see. Chief talked about the abuse of substance, drug and alcohol. On the surface it appears that we may decide, let us bring the anti-drug or anti-alcohol Ministry of Health to deal with that. Yeah? But you may find that this thing is multi-faceted. It has all kinds of issues around it. It might have an education issue, it might have an issue of lack of employment, it might have an issue of maybe insufficient of a good relation with elders and young and all kind of thing. So, the question of the integrated approach is that if you do an intervention, you bring in all players on board. So when the young person or the young people are approached, you deal with all of their needs and all of their thing at one time. That is the approach. Rather than what we have now, very often, is Tom Jones comes today representing the Ministry of Health. 2 weeks time, James Jones comes to represent education. 4 weeks time, somebody comes from Labor Department. Another 5 weeks, somebody come from Kalinago Affairs. And everybody will be trying to do the same thing, using resources that are scarce. And we're not seeing the results because everybody just bounced off each other. Rather than working together. So the policy will create that framework for the integrated. The policy also principle is actually for inclusion and diversity. Everybody has been included. Everybody has been included. All young people have been included. Look at where you are geographically, where you are spiritually, whether it's man or woman or man. everybody has to be included. We cannot leave out anybody. Once they are youth, they are disabled, they whatever they are included. Whether they have university degree or they don't have no degree or they don't have no practice, everybody's positions have to be in there. The policy has to recognize that there is diversity. Youth is not, we have a phrase, we say youth is not a homogeneous group. When you say youth, that is just one, it's one color, one size, one size fits all. No. Youth are different. You have people of different class backgrounds, different geographic location, different educational background, different spirituality, whatever. So the policy has to take those into consideration. And then the other one.
Some of them might have left, but the development officer, the Ministry of Kalinago, here, alright, still here with us. The executive members of the Kalinago Youth Council, several of you all, you're here. So you're here. The cultural officer, Ms. Prosper Paris. Prosper Paris. Still sitting at the back here? Oh, yeah. And of course, the president of the Kalinago Youth Council, Ms. Natasha Green. Well, first of all, let me thank you all very much for asking me to be here this afternoon. This morning, I spent some time at the Ministry of Financial Services, Ministry of Finance, where I signed a witness's signature of a $25 million that was being given to us on land to the farmers and the tourism. I think that's a big deal, and I'll talk about it in the question and answer session, which I will allow you to do. I illustrated everything here. So I will be brief, and I will take some questions. Do me a favor, take that opportunity to ask questions, because that's what I'm here for. I have this big love here for the youth. I believe in the youth. I think you guys can make it happen. And after my presentation, we'll take a few questions. So, first of all, let me say yes, so sincere thanks to the members of the Kalinago Youth Council for inviting me to facilitate a session on youth and business development at this first youth assembly and the inauguration of the Kalinago Youth Council today, 9th of August, which is also being celebrated, I understand it, as World Indigenous Day. Are you aware of that? It also gives me great pleasure to commend the young people of this Kalinago territory, and in particular the members of the Youth Council, for acknowledging the need to shape your own destiny and having the collective will to undertake key activities in that regard. Collective will to undertake key activities. Remember those. I know as well that this event is being hosted under the theme Empowering Kalinago Youth Through Education, Understanding for Economic Challenges, Youth and Business Development. Folks, I have been advised that you have already begun to review the Constitution of the Kalinago Youth Council. A recent online media release has also indicated that the incoming executive has developed a working document comprising priority areas of development concerning the Kalinago youth community, such as the preservation of culture and heritage, the environment, economic development, and social issues. Great ideas. Both of us are remarkable and are indicative of the bigger picture that you envisage for yourselves and your community. It is my hope that you therefore employ principled strategies to get there and attract mentors with diverse expertise who will support your valiant efforts. Having said this, I believe that we are all aware that while there has been some improvement in the way of life of the Kalinago people, with particular respect to education, and as a consequence, non-traditional careers, a major point of contention continues to be the challenge of accessing credit because of the communal ownership of the Kalinago land. And I'm feeling very hot here. I will take that off. So how can the youth of the territory overcome this hurdle? Perhaps a stronger effort could be made to explore alternative credit which requires non-land or preferential loan guarantee arrangements. So listen to that. Non-land or preferential loan guarantee arrangements. First, let me refer to the government economic budget 2016-2017. Building a more resilient economy. I am pleased to note that the Ministry of Kalinago Affairs will receive funds for the continuation of the Territory Community Capacity Building and the Small Business Development Fund, both aimed at providing more direct assistance to the Kalinago people, and in particular, Kalinago entrepreneurs seeking to start or expand their business. Kalinago entrepreneurs seeking to start or expand their business. Secondly, the national budget also speaks to support being given to the Ministry of Commerce, Enterprise and Small Business Development to help small enterprises improve the quality of their products and services and enhance their level of competitiveness. Additionally, please permit me to share with you a few more funding options. So beyond the government and the people here. Aid Bank loan facilities. The Aid Bank is aware of the challenges that young people face with respect to the lack of collateral. We also assure you that loans can be accessed through guarantee of a secondary party acceptable to the bank, or a bill of sale on a valuable piece of equipment, machinery, or vehicle, depending on the nature of your business. So you can take a bill of sale on whatever you're using to share business. So you can do that. We'll talk about later. In light of this, we also have two special projects, namely We Fund, which is We Women Entrepreneurs, We Fund. Women in Agriculture, 18 years and above. And the startups, which we started last year, which I am sorry to say that is not as I had thought that I know we have gotten more demand for it. People have not, and I'll talk to you why later when you have the Q&A session. Okay. Whenever possible, the Aid Bank facilitates technical support to assist with the development of growing micro, small, medium-sized sector. And technical support, when I talk about that, I'm saying if you have certain skills, we will provide the technical support. If you have something in financing, business plan, economics and accounting, we will provide that. But we have to, and we will discuss that further as I go along. The Dominica Business Youth Trust, which was established in 2005, empowers youth between 18 and 35 from all walks of life to own their own business. They work with partners who work with them. Through its two training programs, the Enterprise Development Program and the Small Business Assembly Facility, as well as mentoring and facilitating access to funding, the DYBT's approval of completed business plans, trainings can access up to $20,000 from affiliated financial institutions, which is as a bank. This amount is guaranteed by the DYBT. So if you are going to access funds, let's say at a bank, and you have capital and it's going to cost you $25,000, the DYBT will approve up to $20,000. I forgot what else is what you have to do for the training program. Okay? As a member of the Kalinago Youth, I am sure that consideration can be used to engage in the DYBT to customize special program for the territory pursuant to the different types of terms and conditions, obviously terms and conditions that I go through, those things can be discussed with them. The cooperative approach. In your young people, I also want to apprise you of the corporate approach through which a group of at least 10 persons can apply to the corporate division for support for new ventures. So if you have 10 members before the corporate, you can go to the business, the corporate division, and they can help you access some funding. So that's something I think you can consider. Having paid the relevant application registration fees, a cooperative officer will then be assigned to educate and train the members of the cooperative. If this option is pursued, cooperatives can also receive guidance on the preparation of the business plan and funding opportunities. Most banks tend to ask you to plan. We talk about an idea. If you have an idea, you have an idea. This idea has to be conceptualized into a business, and then you can plan. So you have an idea. You wake up in the morning and say, wait, man, I have an idea. I could use my cell phone to do X, Y, and Z. That's an idea. Then you have to conceptualize that. So for a business plan, they can help with that. We can help with that as well. Special funding agencies. As an indigenous people, you may want to acquaint yourself with funding agencies which are sensitive to improving the way of life of indigenous people by supporting their business ventures. I hasten to caution the importance of honoring the stipulation of this funding agency because to do otherwise would adversely impact their opportunities. So if you go to the funding agency to give you a loan, make sure you pay the loan or you apply for the terms and conditions. That's what you see right here. Having been made more aware of the various funding options available to you, I am confident that you will now position yourselves to take advantage of improving your existing businesses or start up new ones. Small enterprises within agriculture, fishing, tourism, agro-processing, manufacturing, and services sectors is well within your grasp, and my hope is that your energy, skills, and talent can be converted into jobs, revenue, and foreign exchange earnings, thus resulting in economic growth and the social development of the Kalinago territory. Be inspired that some of the most successful entrepreneurs, some from young as 20 years, famous like guys like from Apple, Microsoft, Walmart, all these people started at a very young and tender age. Last, in the words of Richard Branson, the founder of the Virgin Atlantic and the biggest airlines in the world, every startup team needs at least one good mentor. I therefore take this opportunity to encourage you to look around to the leaders who can guide you in your community or within the Kalinago territory, and those who can support your wild adventures. Once again, I commend your efforts to host the forum and to begin planning to how you, each individual lives, can improve your economic condition and the social realities of the Kalinago. The very best to you in your endeavors, and thank you again for asking me. Before I walk off this podium, let me see that notch here. I spoke at the Boston, the IC Boston, at the State College, some time ago. I talked to young people like yourself. And how many of you here have a cell phone? Can you raise your hands? How many of you have a cell phone? Listen, I can go be bachelor, let me see how many hands. Essentially, what do you do for yourself? Some pictures. Have you ever decided either to get on that phone and to call a friend, text and say, listen, I have an idea, we can do some this, just avoid it. I mean, this problem. So we spend 24 hours a day on a cell phone, which can be a tool to make money. How many of you have woke up in the morning and said, man, I have my own business? How many of you? That's kind of a bit for people. But when you do that, you have ideas, you raise ideas, what I would like to do. Right? So that's how you develop yourself. You get an idea, you conceptualize it, and then you start to put it together. But then you start to talk about what do I need, I may not have the expertise. I may not have the money, I may not have the large, or I may not have it. But in business, you cannot go it alone. You have to be able to use the resources available to you. As a general manager, I can't get it in the back, right? So I find that person's good at accounting, that person's good at computers, that person's good at marketing, that person's the big mouth in the business so they can go and talk to people. So what you want to do, you want to be able to have with you a pool of resources available to you, and then you guide them, right? That's how you generate ideas and how you can fulfill your own dreams and aspirations. Having someone sit down for a while, if you have any questions,